The rain pounded against the pavement of the sprawling suburban driveway, masking the sound of the conversation happening under the black umbrella. A man in a sharp tailored suit stood in the shadows, staring up at the master bedroom window where a warm light still glowed. He checked his watch, his face completely devoid of emotion. "It's done, babe," he whispered into his phone, his voice steady. "The wiring was faulty, just like we planned. By midnight, the house will be ash, we'll be $2 million richer, and I'll finally be single." He hung up, slipping the phone into his pocket, and looked at the front door. Upstairs, his wife, Nia, was struggling to zip a heavy suitcase. She was 8 months pregnant with twins, her ankles swollen and her back aching, but she was smiling. Her husband had promised her a baby moon, a surprise trip to reconnect before the babies arrived. She paused to rub her belly, looking at the sonogram photo taped to the mirror. "Daddy's taking us on an adventure," she murmured to the unborn twins, completely unaware that the man downstairs wasn't loading the car, he was destroying their lives. Down in the living room, the atmosphere was suffocatingly quiet. The man moved with terrifying precision. He wasn't packing bags. He was unscrewing the cap of a red canister. He poured the clear, pungent liquid over the expensive Persian rug, splashing it onto the velvet curtains and trailing it toward the staircase. The smell of gasoline began to fill the air, sharp and chemical. He heard the heavy, slow footsteps of his wife moving across the floorboards upstairs. He didn't flinch. He walked to the heavy oak front door, stepped out into the storm, and pulled the door shut. But he didn't just close it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy-duty contractor's padlock. He slid it through the handles he had modified days earlier and snapped it shut with a metallic click. He tossed the key into the dense holly bushes by the porch, wiped his hands on a handkerchief, and walked toward the idling car at the curb. Inside, a woman was checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. "Did you make sure she can't get out?" she asked, bored, applying a coat of lip gloss. "The windows are storm-proofed impact glass. The back door is barred." "It'll look like a tragic accident," he replied, buckling his seatbelt. As they drove away, the first flicker of orange light danced in the living room window, reflecting off the wet pavement. Inside the house, Nia waddled to the top of the stairs, clutching her travel pillow. She stopped. The air was thick. It smelled wrong. Acrid. "Marcus?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. "Did you leave the stove on?" There was no answer. Only the sound of the rain and a strange, low roaring noise coming from the living room. She took a step down, and the smoke alarm finally pierced the silence, a high-pitched shriek that made her jump. Panic flooded her veins. She moved as fast as her pregnancy allowed, stumbling down the stairs, her hand over her mouth. "Marcus, we have to go." She reached the front door and grabbed the handle. It wouldn't turn. She used both hands, rattling it violently. It held fast. She punched in the code on the electronic keypad, but the screen remained black. System offline. Confusion turned to terror. She ran to the kitchen, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. The back door was locked, the deadbolt jammed in a way that wouldn't release. She grabbed a heavy dining chair and swung it with all her might at the window. The chair bounced off the impact-resistant glass with a dull thud, not even leaving a scratch. The heat was rising now. The fire had climbed the curtains and was eating the ceiling, cutting off the path back upstairs. She was trapped on the ground floor. She pulled out her phone to call 911, her fingers shaking so hard she dropped it once. She picked it up and stared at the screen. No service. The bars were empty. Marcus had installed a Wi-Fi booster that morning. She realized now it was a signal jammer. She backed into the corner of the kitchen, the flames reflecting in her wide, tear-filled eyes. She realized the bank accounts were empty. She realized why he had insisted on the storm-proof windows. She realized he hadn't just left, he had left her there to die. Clutching her stomach, she slid down the cabinets to the floor, the smoke filling her lungs. She had $12 in her wallet, no way out, and the man she loved had just signed her death warrant. Have you ever seen an injustice this cruel? Let me know in the comments if you are rooting for Nia to survive. The kitchen had become an oven. The air was so hot it scorched Nia's throat with every shallow breath. The flames were licking at the ceiling now, and the storm-proof windows that had trapped her inside were groaning under the pressure, but they refused to break. She was coughing up black soot, her vision blurring. She knew she had seconds, not minutes. Desperately, She dragged herself across the linoleum, the heat searing her skin. Her hand brushed against the cool metal handle of the basement door. It was unlocked. She threw it open and tumbled down the wooden stairs into the darkness, just as the kitchen ceiling collapsed behind her with a deafening crash. The basement was cooler, but smoke was pouring down from above. She spotted the old coal chute in the far corner, a narrow, rusted metal tunnel leading to the side yard. It was tight, filthy, and terrified her, but it was the only way out. She squeezed her pregnant belly into the small opening, grit scraping against her skin, pushing with every ounce of strength she had left. She got her head and one arm through the grate at the other end, waving frantically into the stormy night air before her strength gave out. Outside, the night was lit up by flashing red and blue lights. Fire trucks had screeched to a halt on the wet pavement. The fire chief looked at the inferno. The roof was already caving in. "It's fully involved," the chief shouted over the roar of the fire. "Structure is unstable. We can't send anyone in. Defensive positions only." Elias, a veteran firefighter with graying hair and a heavy heart, was uncoiling a hose near the side of the house. He had lost his own daughter years ago, and something about this fire felt wrong. Through the driving rain and the roar of the flames, he heard a faint rhythmic thumping. He squinted toward the foundation. A hand, pale and covered in soot, was waving weakly through the coal chute grate near the ground. "Chief, we have a survivor." Elias yelled, but the command to stand down had already been given. He didn't wait. He grabbed the hydraulic spreaders, the jaws of life, and sprinted toward the chute. Ignoring the falling debris, he jammed the tool into the grate. Metal screeched against metal, sparking in the dark, until the grate popped open. He reached in, grabbing Nia's arm. "I got you. I've got you, pull." He dragged her out onto the wet grass, shielding her body with his own as a section of the gutter crashed down nearby. Nia was gasping, her face black with smoke, clutching her stomach protectively. Her eyes fluttered open, locking onto Elias's face. "Don't tell my husband," she whispered, her voice a raspy croak. He locked the door. Before Elias could ask what she meant, her eyes rolled back, and she went limp in his arms. 3 days later, Nia woke up in a sterile white hospital room. The silence was jarring compared to the roar of the fire. She tried to sit up, but a hand gently pushed her back. It was her sister, Sarah, looking exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "The babies?" Nia asked, panic rising in her chest. "They're in the NICU," Sarah said softly, brushing hair off Nia's forehead. "They were born via emergency C-section. They're small, Nia, but they're fighters. Just like you." Nia exhaled, a sob escaping her throat. Then she remembered. "Marcus. Where is he?" Sarah's expression hardened. She pulled a chair closer and lowered her voice. "Nia, listen to me closely. Marcus thinks you're dead." Nia stared at her. "What?" The fire was so intense. They found remains in the basement. They think it was a squatter seeking shelter from the storm, but because of the location, everyone assumed it was you. Marcus identified the body based on a piece of jewelry found nearby. Sarah paused, her jaw tightening. "He's already planning your funeral for Tuesday." Nia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "He thinks he won." "He's doing more than thinking it," Sarah said, pulling out a tablet. "I'm your accountant, remember? I still have access to the joint alerts. Marcus didn't just drain the savings. He bought 2 one-way tickets to Cabo. Departure date, the day after your funeral." Nia watched the screen. There was a news clip playing. Marcus was standing in front of the charred ruins of their home, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, wiping a tear from a dry eye. "My beautiful wife," Marcus told the reporters, his voice breaking theatrically. "She was just clumsy. Probably left a candle burning. I lost my whole world tonight." Nia watched him lie. She watched the man who had barred the doors and poured gasoline, while she packed for a vacation, act the part of the grieving widower. The fear in her heart began to curdle into something else, cold, hard rage. "He wants a funeral?" Nia whispered, closing her eyes. "Let's give him one." If you were in Nia's shoes, would you trust this stranger? Type yes or no. The hospital room had transformed into a war room. Sarah had pulled the blinds tight, casting the room in shadow, while a man in a rumpled trench coat stood by the door, looking skeptical. "Nia, this is Detective Reynolds," Sarah said, gesturing to him. "He's the only one who didn't buy the accidental electrical fire theory." Reynolds stepped forward, his face grim. "I saw the burn patterns, ma'am. I know an accelerant when I smell one. But we have a problem. The fire chief, who just happens to be golf buddies with your husband's father, has officially ruled the cause as faulty wiring in the toaster. Without hard, irrefutable proof, it's just your word against a grieving, wealthy widower." Nia sat up in the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at her bandages. "He locked me in. He jammed the signal." "I believe you," Reynolds said gently. "But in court, a good lawyer will say you were traumatized, confused by the smoke. Marcus has already given a statement saying he tried to get back in to save you, but the door was stuck. He's painting himself as a hero." Nia's eyes hardened. "He's not a hero. He's a murderer. And I can prove it." She looked at Sarah. "The smart home system." Sarah shook her head. "Nia, the server was in the basement. It melted. There's nothing left." "Not the local server," Nia corrected, her voice gaining strength. "My dad. When he installed the system years ago, he didn't trust the local storage. He set up a redundant cloud backup that uploads instantly to an offshore server the moment a breach or alarm is triggered. Marcus doesn't know about it. He doesn't have the password. Only I do." Sarah scrambled to open her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. She pulled up the Legacy Security Portal, a site that hadn't been logged into for years. Nia recited the password, a complex string of characters she had memorized for a rainy day she hoped would never come. Access granted. The three of them huddled around the small screen as the file buffered. Then, the video played. The timestamp read 9:42 p.m. The footage was crisp. It showed Marcus standing in the living room, not looking for a suitcase, but holding the red gas canister. The audio was chillingly clear. They heard the splash of the liquid. They heard him humming to himself. They watched him walk to the front door, step out, and then, the most damning moment of all, the distinct sound of the heavy padlock clicking shut from the outside. Then his voice, recorded by the porch camera as he made the call. "By midnight, we'll be $2 million richer." Reynolds let out a long breath. "That's it. That's a smoking gun. We can arrest him right now." He reached for his phone, but Nia's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. "No," she said. Reynolds looked at her, confused. "Ma'am, he's dangerous. We need to bring him in." "If you arrest him now," Nia said, her voice turning cold and sharp, "he'll get a lawyer. He'll make bail. He'll spin a story about how the video is out of context or manipulated. He destroyed my home. He tried to kill my children. He dragged my name through the mud on national television." She looked at the screen where Marcus was still playing on the news loop, looking sad and noble. "I don't just want him in handcuffs," Nia declared. "I want him destroyed. The funeral is tomorrow." "Yes," Sarah answered, sensing where this was going. "I'm going," Nia said. While Nia rested to build her strength, Sarah and Reynolds went to work solidifying the trap. Sarah dug into the faulty wiring report. It didn't take long to find the crack in the armor. She tracked down the electrician who had inspected the house a week prior, a man with a suspended license and a sudden influx of cash. With a little pressure from Reynolds, the electrician admitted on a hidden recorder that Marcus had paid him $5,000 to loosen the wires in the breaker box to create a plausible cause. To top it off, they found the Mistress's digital footprint. Vanessa had posted a selfie from the passenger seat of Marcus's car minutes before the fire started, captioned "New beginnings start tonight," with a fire emoji. The evidence was a mountain. The video was the avalanche waiting to fall. As the sun rose on the morning of the funeral, Nia stood in front of the hospital mirror. She was in pain, but she stood tall. She applied red lipstick, war paint. "Do you think he suspects anything?" Sarah asked, handing Nia a pair of dark sunglasses to hide the healing burns around her eyes. Nia looked at her reflection, then at the door. "He thinks I'm ash in a basement. He has no idea what's coming." "Do you think Marcus suspects anything yet? Hit the like button if you want to see him taken down." The church was packed, the air thick with the scent of expensive lilies and performative grief. It was a funeral fit for a queen, paid for by the man who had killed her. Marcus stood at the front of the room, looking devastatingly handsome in his custom black suit. To the untrained eye, he was a broken man. But from the back pew, under the brim of a wide black hat, Vanessa watched him with impatient eyes. She checked her phone, texting him covertly, "Wrap it up. The flight is at 6 a.m. tomorrow." Marcus glanced at his phone, then stepped up to the podium. A massive blown-up photograph of Nia stood behind him, a picture he had chosen specifically because she looked tired and disheveled in it. "Nia was my world," Marcus began, his voice booming through the church speakers. He paused for effect, letting a single, practiced tear roll down his cheek. But we all knew Nia. She was troubled, forgetful, a bit unstable, especially with the pregnancy hormones. A murmur went through the crowd. He was doing it. He wasn't just burying her, he was rewriting her history. "She probably left the stove on," Marcus continued, shaking his head with mock forgiveness. "Or knocked over a candle. She was always so clumsy. I tried to tell her to be careful. I tried to save her from herself. But in the end, her own carelessness took her from us." Outside the heavy oak doors of the church, a black SUV sat idling. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Detective Reynolds slammed his phone down on the dashboard. "Damn it," Reynolds cursed. "That was the chief. He knows we're here." He ordered a stand down. Sarah gasped. "What? Why?" "Politics," Reynolds spat. "The mayor is old friends with Marcus's father. They're saying the cloud video has chain of custody issues. They're claiming it could be a deepfake. If we arrest him now, the chief will bury the evidence before it ever sees a courtroom. They'll let him walk." Nia sat in the back seat, listening to Marcus's voice drift out through the open church windows. Her own carelessness. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. The fire had burned away her fear, leaving only cold determination. "They want to bury the evidence?" Nia asked quietly. "Fine. Then we won't give them to the police first. We'll give them to the public." She pulled out her phone. Sarah had already cracked the church's Bluetooth AV system password. Nia's thumb hovered over the connect button. "Nia, you're not medically cleared for this," Sarah warned, looking at the bandages peeking out from the neckline of Nia's dress. "The stress alone." "He's in there destroying my memory," Nia said, opening the car door. "I'm going to destroy his life." She stepped out onto the pavement. She was weak, her body screaming in pain with every movement, but she forced her spine straight. She adjusted her dark sunglasses, hiding the burns around her eyes, and smoothed down her sleek black dress. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like an avenging angel. Inside the church, Marcus was winding down. "And so, I accept the insurance check. I mean the condolences, with a heavy heart. I will try to rebuild. I will try to spend this money on things Nia would have wanted." He was smiling internally. It was over. He had won. The money was his. The mistress was waiting. The wife was dead. Nia tapped her phone screen. Connected. She signaled to Reynolds to open the church doors. "The trap is set. What do you think Marcus's reaction will be when he sees Nia alive? Give me your prediction." Marcus gripped the sides of the wooden podium, looking out at the tearful faces of his neighbors. He was feeling invincible. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice dropping to a somber whisper. "I think Nia is looking down on us right now, smiling." Suddenly, the massive projection screen behind him flickered. The image of Nia's face distorted, pixelated, and then vanished into static. A loud screech of feedback tore through the speakers, making the congregation cover their ears. "Technical difficulties," Marcus muttered, waving a hand at the AV booth. "Cut the feed." But the feed didn't cut. Instead, a new video appeared. It was grainy black and white night vision, but the subject was unmistakable. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. On the screen, giant and looming over the altar, was Marcus. He wasn't crying. He wasn't mourning. He was pouring gasoline onto a rug. The audio boomed through the church, louder than any hymn. "It's done, babe. The wiring was faulty. By midnight, we'll be $2 million richer." Marcus froze. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. He spun around to look at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "No!" he shrieked, his voice cracking. "That's fake. That's AI. Someone hacked the system." He pointed a shaking finger at the back of the room. "Turn it off. It's a lie." In the pews, Vanessa, the mistress, stood up abruptly. She pulled her hat down low and tried to slip into the side aisle, but Detective Reynolds stepped out from behind a pillar, blocking her path with a grim smile. "Sit down, ma'am. The show's not over." Then, the heavy double doors at the back of the church swung open with a thunderous bang that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Silence fell over the room. Nia stood there, framed by the bright daylight from outside. She walked forward. She didn't limp. She moved with a slow, terrifying grace. The congregation parted like the Red Sea, people whispering, crossing themselves, staring in disbelief at the woman who was supposed to be dead. The only sound in the massive hall was the rhythmic click-clack of her heels on the stone floor. She stopped 10 feet from the altar, staring up at her husband. "You said I was clumsy, Marcus," Nia said. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the dead silence, it carried to the rafters. She was holding a wireless microphone she had taken from the car. "You told everyone I left the stove on." Marcus backed away until he hit the altar table. He looked wild, cornered. "Nia, baby. I thought you were dead. I was so sad. I tried to get back in to save you." "Did you?" Nia asked calmly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a heavy, tarnished object. She held it up for the entire church to see. It was the heavy-duty padlock key. "Then why did the fire department find this in the bushes where you threw it? Why was the front door locked from the outside?" The crowd erupted. Shouts of "murderer" and "monster" rang out. Marcus's mask of sanity shattered completely. His eyes bulged, and his lips curled back in a snarl. "You bitch!" he screamed, lunging off the stage. "You ruin everything. You were supposed to die." He raised his hand to strike her, but he never made contact. Detective Reynolds hit him like a linebacker, tackling him to the ground before he could get within 5 feet of Nia. 3 uniformed officers swarmed in, pinning Marcus to the red carpet. "Marcus Sterling, you are under arrest for attempted murder, arson, and insurance fraud," Reynolds yelled over Marcus's incoherent screaming. As they hauled him up, cuffed and struggling, Marcus locked eyes with Nia. "You get nothing," he spat, desperate to hurt her one last time. "The house is gone. The accounts are empty. I burned it all down. You're destitute." Nia stepped closer, looking down at him with pity rather than hate. "That's the funny thing about being a control freak, Marcus. You never read the fine print." She leaned in so the microphone caught every word. "My father put the house in an irrevocable trust. The insurance policy isn't in your name. It's in the trust's name. And the beneficiaries are my children." She smiled, a genuine, cold smile. "You didn't burn my money, Marcus. You just burned your own freedom for absolutely nothing." Marcus went limp, the realization crushing him instantly. He was dragged out of the church doors, his screams fading into the distance. 6 months later. The sun was setting over a modest, beautiful cottage near the coast. The air smelled of salt and jasmine, not smoke. Nia sat on the porch swing, rocking gently. In her arms 2 healthy, chubby babies were sleeping soundly, a boy and a girl. Marcus had pleaded guilty to avoid a life sentence. He was serving 50 years in a maximum security prison. Vanessa had turned on him instantly, trading her testimony for a lighter sentence, but her reputation was destroyed forever. Nia looked down at her phone. A video file was open, the footage of the fire. The evidence that had saved her life. She pressed delete. She didn't need it anymore. She looked out at the ocean, took a deep breath of clean, fresh air, and smiled. She had survived the fire, and like gold refined in the heat, she had come out the other side unbreakable. Rate that satisfying ending from 1 to 10. And subscribe for more stories of justice served.